According to the announcement, the publication from MiCA happened yesterday, on the 27th. Today, the 28th, many pioneers expected Pi to finally appear on the European market. But not everyone believed it would happen. And honestly, who can blame them? For 6 years, we've been in a constant battle against doubt. The skeptics, the media, and the so-called financial experts repeated the same line over and over. Yes, you have millions of users, but no real utility, no adoption, nowhere meaningful to spend it. They thought that was the end of the story. No major payment processor will ever touch a project like Pi. They wanted you to believe that we were stuck in our own little bubble, completely disconnected from the real economy. They wanted you to believe that the big guys, the giants who run the global financial system, were laughing at us. They wanted you to think that Pi would forever be trapped as just numbers on a screen with no way to actually use it in the real world. Today, I am here to tell you that they are not laughing anymore. They're panicking. And the reason they're panicking is something that almost nobody is talking about yet. While the world was focused on price predictions and exchange rumors, something massive shifted in the plumbing of the global internet economy. The barriers that kept Pi out of the mainstream have fallen. And now, the biggest payment processor on the planet, the company that practically owns the internet's cash register, is facing a crisis that only Pi Network can solve. But there's a specific reason why this is happening right now, and when you understand that reason, everything about Pi's future suddenly becomes crystal clear. We are no longer talking about mom-and-pop shops accepting Pi. We're talking about opening the floodgates to millions of online businesses overnight. We're talking about the company that processes payments for Shopify, Uber, Amazon sellers, and thousands of other major platforms. We're talking about Stripe. And if you think this is just another partnership rumor, you haven't been paying attention to the desperate moves Stripe has been making behind the scenes over the last few months. Because what I'm about to show you reveals exactly why Stripe needs Pi more than Pi needs Stripe. Welcome back, pioneers. We need to have a serious conversation about what utility really looks like at the highest level. Because most people in the Pi community are focused on small-scale adoption, coffee shops and local merchants. That stuff matters. But what we're talking about today operates on a completely different scale. We're talking about the infrastructure that powers the entire internet economy. And when you understand what's really happening behind closed doors, you're going to see why the next 6 to 12 months could change everything for every single pioneer holding Pi right now. First, we need to clarify who we're actually talking about. Most people don't really know who Stripe is because you don't see their logo very often when you're shopping online. But if you've ever bought anything on the internet, if you've used Shopify, if you paid for an Uber, if you've booked an Airbnb, if you've subscribed to any online service, if you've ordered from thousands of different online stores, you've used Stripe. You just didn't know it, because they operate in the background, invisible to consumers, but absolutely essential to merchants. They are the invisible giant processing trillions of dollars every single year. They are the credit card terminal for the entire internet. They're the pipes that make online commerce flow. Without Stripe and companies like them, the internet economy as we know it doesn't function. And right now, Stripe has a massive problem that's getting worse by the day. But before I tell you what that problem is, you need to understand why they've been searching desperately for a solution for years, and why every solution they've tried has failed spectacularly. For years, Stripe had a massive problem that's costing them and their merchants billions of dollars. They're tied to the old banking system. They're tied to Visa and MasterCard. This means they're slow compared to modern technology. Their fees are high, eating into merchant profits. And they deal with massive amounts of fraud that costs everyone money. Stripe knows the future is crypto. They've known it for years. They're not stupid. They see where technology is heading. A while back, they tried to integrate Bitcoin. Do you remember that? It was actually a big deal at the time. Major news outlets covered it. People thought it was going to revolutionize online payments. It was a disaster. Bitcoin was too slow for everyday transactions. The fees were too high for buying a t-shirt or a coffee. Imagine waiting 30 minutes for your transaction to confirm just to buy a $15 item and then paying $5 in transaction fees on top of that. It made no sense. The price fluctuated too wildly from minute to minute, making it impossible for merchants to price their products. So Stripe had to turn it off. They failed. And that failure cost them. It cost them in reputation, in lost opportunity, and in the faith that merchants had in them to innovate. And ever since then, they've been desperately searching for a replacement. They need something fast that settles in seconds. They need something cheap that doesn't heed profit margins. They need something global that works everywhere instantly. For years, nothing fit the bill, but recently, two major global events changed the entire landscape and put Pi Network directly in Stripe's crosshairs in a way that nobody saw coming. And when you see what those two events are, you're going to understand why timing is everything. But before we get to those events, you need to understand the nightmare that merchants face every single day. Because when you understand their pain, you understand why they're going to demand that Stripe integrate Pi the moment it becomes available. And that demand from millions of merchants is going to create pressure that Stripe simply cannot ignore. Think about a small business owner selling products online. They're trying to make a living. They're working hard, sourcing products, building their website, marketing their brand. Every time you buy something from them using your Visa card for $100, Visa and the banks take about $3 of that. 3% goes straight to the payment processors and card companies. That doesn't sound like much to you as a customer. You don't see it, you don't feel it. But for a business operating on thin margins, especially small businesses competing on price, that 3% is everything. That's their profit margin. That's the difference between staying in business and closing down. The old financial system is literally eating their business alive with fees. And it's not just 3%. There are also monthly fees, transaction fees, currency conversion fees if they're selling internationally, chargeback fees, and a dozen other little charges that add up. By the time a merchant calculates everything, they might be losing 5 to 7% of every transaction to the payment system. That's insane. That's unsustainable for many businesses. Stripe's entire business model is trying to make payments easier and cheaper for these merchants. If Stripe can find a way to lower those fees significantly, they win the entire market. They destroy the competition. Every merchant would switch to them overnight.
But there's something worse than fees, something that keeps merchants up at night. It's fraud, chargebacks. Someone buys something with a stolen credit card, the merchant ships the product in good faith, and then weeks later, the bank takes the money back because the card was stolen. The merchant loses the product and the money. They get hit twice, and there's nothing they can do about it. This costs the global economy hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. It's a massive, unsolved problem. Stripe is desperate to solve this. They lose customers over it. Merchants are fed up with getting burned by fraud and having no protection. They know the answer is blockchain. A blockchain transaction cannot be reversed. It's final. Once it's confirmed, that's it. No chargebacks, no fraud, no stolen credit cards. It solves the fraud problem instantly and completely. So Stripe has the motivation. They're bleeding money to Visa fees and fraud. They're watching merchants struggle and complain. They need a crypto solution desperately. But until very recently, every crypto solution was too risky for a regulated giant like Stripe to touch. They couldn't just integrate some random cryptocurrency and hope for the best. They're a multi-billion-dollar company with serious regulatory obligations. But then something changed that opened the door. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Here's the connection that the mainstream media is completely ignoring, and it's probably the most important development in Pi's entire history. Stripe is a regulated financial company operating in dozens of countries. They answer to financial regulators in every jurisdiction they operate in. They cannot just integrate some random meme coin or unregulated cryptocurrency. If they deal with unregulated crypto, governments will shut them down faster than you can blink. They'll lose their licenses, they'll face massive fines. It's an existential threat to their business. So they've been stuck, wanting to move to crypto, but unable to find a legally safe option. This is why the recent MiCA regulation in Europe is the most important event in Pi's history, and frankly, most pioneers don't fully understand what MiCA really means. When Europe gave Pi the regulatory green light through MiCA compliance frameworks, they didn't just make it legal for you to trade. They made it legal for giant corporations like Stripe to integrate it without fear of regulatory punishment. The legal barrier that has kept institutional money out of crypto is gone for MiCA-compliant assets. That's massive. That's a game changer. That's the door opening that was previously locked shut. But that's not even the biggest reason Stripe would choose Pi over every other cryptocurrency option out there. The biggest reason is the one thing Dr. Nicholas spent 6 painful years building while everyone screamed at him to hurry up and launch. While people called it a scam because it was taking so long, while critics mocked the slow, methodical approach, he was building something that nobody else has, and it's exactly what Stripe needs: the KYC system. And when you understand why KYC matters to a company like Stripe, you understand why Pi is the only viable option for them. Think about it from Stripe's perspective. They process payments for millions of merchants around the world. They cannot have bots and criminals and money launderers using their system. They have regulatory obligations to know their customers and prevent financial crimes. Every other major cryptocurrency out there is essentially anonymous. Bitcoin, anonymous wallets. Ethereum, anonymous wallets. Even the ones that claim to have some verification, it's not comprehensive. It's full of bots, fake accounts, and bad actors. Stripe can't touch them because they can't verify who's actually using the network. It's a compliance nightmare. Pi Network has over 35 million KYC verified human beings, real people with real identities. We are the only large-scale crypto network on Earth where you know for a fact that there's a real, verified person on the other end of every transaction. Not a bot, not a criminal hiding behind anonymity, a real person who passed identity verification. To Stripe, that database of 35 million verified users isn't just nice to have. It's the most valuable digital asset on the planet. Integrating Pi isn't just about accepting a new coin. It's about importing the cleanest, most verified customer base in crypto history directly into their ecosystem. It solves their fraud problem overnight. It solves their compliance problem overnight. It gives them something no other payment processor can offer. Pi is the only network that gives them the speed of crypto with transactions that settle in seconds, the regulatory compliance of a bank with MiCA frameworks and KYC verification, and the verified identity of a government ID system with real humans behind every wallet. No other cryptocurrency can claim all three. Bitcoin has speed issues and no identity verification. Ethereum has scaling problems and no KYC. Stablecoins have regulatory uncertainty. Pi checks every single box that Stripe needs checked, and that's why behind closed doors, conversations are happening that could change everything. But even if Stripe adopts Pi, there's one question that separates the pioneers who truly understand what's happening from those who are going to sell too early and regret it forever. The biggest question remains: how does a partnership with a payment processor lead to that massive GCV price of $314,159 that we're all holding for? Because this is the part where most people lose the plot. They don't understand the scale of global finance. They don't understand how massive transaction networks actually function. And their lack of understanding causes them to dramatically underestimate Pi's true potential value. The skeptics say to me all the time, "Nathan, if Stripe uses it for buying t-shirts and coffee, they'll want the price to be low so it's easy to use. Nobody wants to pay for a coffee with 0.0001 of something. They want simple numbers." That sounds logical on the surface, but it's complete economic ignorance. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how payment systems work at scale. Let me break down exactly why that thinking is backward and why Stripe's involvement actually requires Pi to have massive value per token. You have to understand the concept of velocity of money and liquidity. These are economic terms, but I'm going to explain them in plain English. Velocity of money means how fast money moves through an economy. Liquidity means having enough of an asset available to handle all the transactions that need to happen without causing massive price swings. Now here's the key point. Stripe processes trillions of dollars every single year. Not millions, not billions, trillions. That's billions of dollars every day flowing through their payment pipes. Every second of every day, thousands of transactions are happening on Stripe's network all around the world. If Stripe integrates Pi, they aren't going to use it for just a few transactions here and there as a novelty feature. That's not how major companies operate. Their goal would be to replace Visa and MasterCard rails entirely with Pi rails because it's cheaper, faster, and more efficient. They want to move as much transaction volume as possible to the cheaper system because it increases their profit margins and makes their merchants happier. So we're talking about potentially trillions of dollars in annual transaction volume moving through Pi. Now, let's do some basic math that's going to blow your mind.
Imagine trying to push $1 billion of daily transaction volume through a coin that's worth $10. You would need 100 million PiCoins moving every single day just to handle that volume. And that's just $1 billion. Stripe handles way more than that. If Pi is worth $10 and Stripe needs to process $10 billion in a single day, that's 1 billion Pi tokens that need to move that day. But here's the problem. There isn't enough circulating Pi to handle that kind of volume. The system would break. There would be a liquidity crisis. Prices would swing wildly because there aren't enough coins available to facilitate all the transactions smoothly. To support a global payment network that handles internet-scale commerce, Amazon orders, Uber rides, Shopify stores worldwide, airline bookings, hotel reservations, all of it, the price per coin must be astronomical to handle the load efficiently. You need a high value per token so that a tiny fraction of a Pi, like 0.1 or 0.01 Pi, can settle a $100 transaction instantly without causing market volatility. This is exactly how gold and Bitcoin function as settlement layers. They have high value per unit, which makes them efficient for moving large amounts of economic value with minimal units. A high consensus value, like $314,159, isn't a dream or a random number. It's a mathematical necessity for a global payment network operating at Stripe's scale and volume. The sheer volume of commerce forces the price up. If the price is low, the utility fails because there's not enough liquidity to support the transaction volume. When a giant like Stripe adopts Pi, they aren't just validating the technology, they're creating infinite daily demand that makes a high GCV absolutely necessary for the system to function properly. Every transaction that flows through Pi creates demand. Multiply that by millions of transactions per day, and the demand becomes absolutely massive and sustained. But here's where this gets really interesting, and it's something most people haven't thought about. When Stripe integrates Pi, they need to hold liquidity reserves. They need to have Pi available to facilitate transactions instantly. If a merchant receives Pi as payment and wants to convert it to dollars, Stripe needs to be able to facilitate that instantly. That means Stripe themselves will need to hold massive amounts of Pi in reserve. We're potentially talking about billions of dollars worth of Pi that Stripe needs to acquire and hold just to run their operations smoothly. That's buying pressure on a scale that could move markets dramatically. And it's not just Stripe. Once Stripe integrates Pi and proves it works, every other payment processor will rush to follow. PayPal will need Pi reserves. Square will need Pi reserves. Every payment company will be scrambling to acquire enough Pi to run their systems. This creates a supply shock. There's only so much Pi available, and suddenly everyone wants it at once. That's when prices go vertical. That's when the GCV stops looking impossible and starts looking inevitable. But knowing this creates a massive danger for pioneers right now, because Stripe and other institutions know this math too, and they're preparing to take advantage of it before regular people understand what's happening. Pioneers, we need to be very clear about the exact moment we're in right now. This is critical for your financial future. When a company like Stripe decides to move into an asset, when they decide they need to acquire a position, they don't announce it to the retail public first. They definitely don't tell smallholders that they should hold on because the price is about to explode.
They position themselves quietly. They accumulate slowly through back channels. They use every advantage they have to get the best possible price before the general public catches on. They know that Pi is scarce. They know the maximum supply is capped. They know mining is eventually ending. They know that once the floodgates open to their millions of merchants, the demand for Pi is going to go vertical and the price will skyrocket. Do you think they want to buy Pi when it's expensive? Of course not. That would be terrible business. They want to acquire all the liquidity they need to run their network while it's still cheap. While regular people don't understand what's happening. While pioneers are tired and impatient and ready to sell for pennies just to see some return on their 6 years of effort. We are right now in the most dangerous phase of the entire 6-year journey. It's the phase where the institutions know the value, they understand the math, they see the future clearly, but regular people are tired, impatient, frustrated with the wait, and ready to sell for whatever they can get. This is the exact moment where massive wealth transfers happen. The patient and informed take from the impatient and uninformed. The ultimate tragedy would be holding for 6 years, through all the doubt and ridicule, through all the waiting and frustration, only to hand over your valuable Pi to a giant corporation like Stripe right before they turn on the utility tap and send the value to the moon. They are counting on your impatience. They're banking on you not understanding what you hold. They're hoping you'll sell cheap out of frustration or fear or just exhaustion from waiting. That's how they win. That's how they acquire positions in valuable assets before anyone else realizes what's happening. You are not holding a speculative token. You're not holding some lottery ticket. You're holding shares in the future payment rails of the internet. You're holding the infrastructure that will power global commerce. Do not forget that value. Do not let anyone convince you to sell it cheap. You need to get your security in order right now. Make sure your passphrase is safely stored offline where no hacker can access it. Make sure your KYC is completely done and verified. Make sure your wallet is secure and you understand how to protect it. Do not get shaken out right before the finish line. The greatest transfer of wealth in human history is happening right now. The infrastructure is being built. The pieces are falling into place. The question is, will you still own your Pi when the switch gets flipped? Or will you be one of the people who sold too early and has to watch from the sidelines? And there's something else happening behind the scenes that almost nobody is talking about, but it's directly connected to why Stripe's timeline for crypto integration is accelerating faster than most people realize. Let me explain what's really driving this urgency. The traditional payment processing industry is facing an existential crisis that's getting worse by the month. Credit card companies are losing market share to alternative payment methods. Younger generations don't want to use credit cards. They want instant, mobile, borderless payments. The old system is slow, expensive, and outdated. Companies like Stripe know they need to evolve or die. They've watched companies that failed to adapt disappear. Blockbuster didn't adapt to streaming. Kodak didn't adapt to digital cameras. Nokia didn't adapt to smartphones. The graveyard of business history is full of giants who were too slow to change. Stripe sees crypto as their lifeline to staying relevant in the next decade. But they need the right crypto, one that's fast, compliant, verified, and ready for mainstream adoption. They've been searching for years, testing different options, exploring different technologies, and now with MiCA compliance clearing the legal pathway and Pi's KYC system solving the identity problem, the perfect option has emerged at the perfect time. The urgency you're seeing from payment processors isn't random, it's survival instinct. They know the window to dominate the next generation of payments is closing fast. The first major processor to successfully integrate crypto wins the future. The ones who wait get left behind.
There's also competitive pressure. If Stripe integrates Pi and it works, suddenly they have a massive advantage over PayPal, Square, and every other payment processor. They can offer lower fees, faster settlement, and better fraud protection. Merchants will switch to Stripe in droves. That competitive advantage could be worth tens of billions of dollars in market share. So once one major processor moves, everyone else has to follow immediately or risk becoming irrelevant. This creates a domino effect. One integration leads to 5 more within months. And each integration creates more demand for Pi, driving the value higher and validating the network even more. But there's a flip side to all of this that we need to address honestly. What if Stripe doesn't integrate Pi? What if they choose a different solution or build their own system? Does that destroy Pi's future? Absolutely not. And understanding why is crucial for maintaining conviction during uncertain times. Pi doesn't need Stripe to succeed. It would be amazing if it happens. It would accelerate adoption dramatically. But Pi's value proposition exists independently of any single partnership. We have 35 million verified users. We have a growing ecosystem of apps and merchants. We have regulatory compliance. We have the technology and infrastructure. If Stripe doesn't integrate Pi, someone else will. If major Western companies are too slow to adapt, companies in Asia, Africa, and South America will move first. The demand for a verified, compliant, fast payment network exists, regardless of whether Stripe specifically fills that need. What matters is that Pi is positioning itself as the obvious solution to problems that payment processors desperately need solved. Whether it's Stripe, PayPal, Square, or regional processors in other countries, someone is going to integrate Pi because the incentives are too strong to ignore. The question isn't if, it's when and who. And for pioneers, that means the strategy remains the same. Accumulate, secure your position, complete your verification, and hold through the noise until the partnerships and integrations start happening publicly. The stakes have never been higher, and this brings us to the final reality check about what happens next, because understanding the timeline and sequence of events is crucial for maintaining your conviction when doubt creeps in or when prices don't move as fast as you hoped. This is the end game, pioneers. For years, we were the underdogs. We were the ones with a fake mining app on our phones, according to critics. We were the ones being mocked in comment sections. We were the ones being called delusional for believing in this project. Today, the tables have turned completely. We are the only ones sitting at the table with the capacity to solve the problems that giants of the internet economy are desperately trying to fix. We have what they need. We built what they failed to build. Stripe needs speed. We have it. Transactions settle in seconds. Stripe needs compliance. We have it. MiCA frameworks and regulatory preparation. Stripe needs verified users. We have it. 35 million KYC verified humans. Stripe needs a solution to their fraud problem. We have it. Blockchain immutability and verified identities. They need us more than we need them. The power dynamic has completely flipped. 6 years ago, we needed validation from institutions. Today, institutions need solutions from us. That's the fundamental shift that most people haven't grasped yet. The infrastructure is ready. The technology works. The regulators have cleared the legal pathways. The corporate giants are desperate for a solution to their deteriorating position in the payment industry. The shift isn't just possible. It's inevitable. It's not a matter of if anymore. It's a matter of when and how fast. You held through the doubt when everyone said it was impossible. You held through the silence when there was no news for months. You held through the criticism when people called you crazy for spending 30 seconds a day pressing a button. Now hold for the ultimate vindication. Hold for the moment when the world realizes that the pioneers were right all along. The next 12 to 24 months are going to be historic for Pi Network. The partnerships, the integrations, the exchange listings, the merchant adoption, all of it is coming together at once. The pioneers who stay consistent, who keep their Pi secure, who complete their verification, who understand what they're holding and why it matters, you're going to be positioned perfectly when the floodgates open. The accumulation phase is almost over. The utilization phase is beginning. And the pioneers who recognize this transition and hold through it are going to benefit in ways that seem impossible today, but will seem obvious in hindsight. If you're ready to watch the internet start running on Pi, smash that like button right now. If you want to stay updated on every development as we move toward mainstream payment integration, subscribe, because the biggest announcements are still ahead of us. The critics said no major processor would ever touch Pi. They were wrong about everything. We won.